Now that the Cold War was over, the world was mostly peaceful, but not completely. In 1992, the nation of Hermita split up into two parts: North Hermita and South Hermita. However, neither side was communist. The north side was very isolationist. No one comes in, no one comes out. The south side was more democratic. Soon after splitting up, the sides went to war. Comerica took advantage of the war and started chopping trees in South Hermita without permission. They accidentally set fire to parts of the jungle there, so they quickly left and paid some war reparations. By fall 1992, the Hermita War was over. Nobody won. Now, besides that war, the 90s had some other interesting things, such as computers. There were three main operating systems: macOS, created by Apple, Windows created by Microsoft, and DOS created by Microhard. Now, they didn't start existing in the 90s. Computers were invented back in World War II. However, they became more popular and easier to use in the 90s. Also, Windows, macOS and DOS all started in the 80s. Here's a list of all Windows, macOS and DOS operating systems up to 2000. There was macOS 1 of 1984, Windows 1.0 of 1985, macOS 2 of 1986, Windows 2.0 of 1987, macOS 3 and 4 both of 1987, DOS 1.0 of 1988, Windows 3 of 1990, macOS 5 of 1990, DOS 2.0 of 1991, Windows 3.1 of 1992, macOS 6 of 1993, Windows 4.0 of 1994, Windows 95, DOS 95, and macOS 7 all of 1995. There's also Windows 96, Windows 97, Windows 98, Windows 99, Windows 2000, and Windows Me. Plus DOS 98, macOS 8 of 1997 and macOS 9 of 1998. Those were the operating systems released up to the year 2000. By the way, the Internet did exist and worked on the operating systems released after 1990. However, you had to connect your phone to your computer, so you couldn't call anyone while being on the Internet. This was called dial-up Internet. In 1994, to prevent more world wars or Cold Wars, a global organization called the United Nations was created. Their headquarters was an island west of Hawaii called UN City. Nobody lived on this island originally, so the city became a hub for immigration. They even divided the city up into different sections. In the northwest there was the Americas quarter, in the middle west there was the Asian quarter, in the center there was the Europe quarter, in the east there was the African quarter, in between the Americas, Europe and African quarter there was the town square where people worked. Northeast of the town square there was the desert quarter, which was a desert where nobody lived, it was just used for mineral and oil extraction. In the south of the island there was a lake which was named Lake Peace. The land around it became the Lake Peace Reserve, so nobody lived there either. By 1999, the population of UN City was 890,000. The European quarter had the most people, with a population of 56,000. The African quarter had the least, with a population of 4,000. The reason for this was likely because getting to UN City is much harder from Africa due to the continent being mostly poor. Also, the continent of Mindverse didn't get a quarter because they didn't have enough people, same with Oceania. So Miniversians and Oceanians could live in whichever quarter they pleased. Also, the UN headquarters was in the town square. In 1998, Twobbular Land changed their flag, removing the British watermark. They also bought a piece of land from Canada, and made a city there called Toronto, which became the new capital. In 1999, Lemuria broke away from the Hindustani Empire, taking the island of Madagascar. Pakistan also broke away, leading to the fall of the Hindustani Empire. The rest of the Hindustani Empire became India. In 1995, the U.S. state of Copperland was on the decline. Their only industry was copper mining, and the copper was running out. So, they merged with Arizona. Well, that's all the historical stuff that happened in the 90s, so now onto the video game consoles released then. So in 1993, there was the Nintendo Satellaview, an add-on to the SNES. You could connect it to your TV and receive new limited edition games. It was also 32-bit. In 1994 there was the Mutant NES. A souped-up version of the NES that could play NES and SNES games, along with Mutant NES exclusives, like Donald Chest, Rifle Factory Run. In 1995 there was the PS1 and the Game Boy Color. The PS1 was 3D and used discs. The Game Boy Color was a Game Boy with color that was backwards compatible with the Game Boy. In 1995 there was also the Sega Saturn, which had the same capabilities as the PS1, so it didn't sell well, especially due to their advertisements. In 1996, Nintendo released their first 3D console, the Nintendo 64. Like the PS1 and Sega Saturn, it used discs. It had great games like Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, and countless others. In 1998, the Sega Dreamcast was released. Unlike the Sega Saturn, it was a good console. However, it could not beat the PS2, released in 2000, which was the PS1 but even better. But the main reason it sold so well was because of the hit title, Wallace and Gromit Meet Garfield.